Hello, people in the future. It's us. It's me. It's Logan. Normally, there would be another stream today on this Monday day, but not today because Cutie Cult is over. It's done. They've been murdered. They're not so cute no more because their body's in the ground. Instead, welcome to a laid-back Laidlaw that is going to be focused on looking at the setting guides, Lyra's Guide to Risk and Reward and Lyra's Guide to Retia, our combined over 1,000 pages of setting guide information featuring a treasury, new monsters, new types of monsters, new rules, a sub-edition for D&D 5th edition, over 100 class options, over 100 race options, and more, and other such things. We are going to be today, I thought it would be fun to try to get into a new format of just doing kind of laid-back AMA-style videos that may not become laid-back depending on how long they go on, depending on how excited I get. But pending any guests popping up in the chat, or not in the chat, pending any guests popping up who want to do these with me in the Discord, it's just going to be me talking to the chat, answering questions, perhaps going over design philosophy as best I can, because that stuff can be sometimes a bit hard to explain in motion, and just generally hanging out and having a good time. In the future, I would like to use these sorts of streams to go over our content and have in-depth looks at things, like having a longer look at the Sword Saint, going over how it's designed, how it's intended to work, what minor rules, both in 5th edition and not, may cause people to have some misunderstandings about it, going over minor things that we changed during playtesting, and so on and so forth. Also going over NPCs, talking about art, maybe talking about the setting. We'll hopefully get to do more of these and get to talk more about them because I want to make more videos on the content and how to use it. But today we're going to start with an open-ended, very laid-back Laidlaw with me, Logan Laidlaw. We're going to be using the AMA feature for those who have just popped in. We're going to be using the AMA feature on the side or in the Twitch chat so you can redeem your questions, and I will answer them from there. And if I run out of questions there, then I will turn to the chat. The chat is, as you can see, on screen. In fact, I'm going to make it even bigger. Hold on, chat. Let's make you even more visible, buddy. There we go. Since you're the star today. And I'm gonna change the music. Oh! Dueler! Oh, it's been a while. Oh, you've just become finally, a stream boss worth challenging. Thank you so much, Dueler. And the stream boss is up today, so if anybody wants to try to beat up the stream boss, please feel free to do so. You now have a worthy opponent. All right. I'm gonna go down them. If some of these are jokes, that's fine, but of course, if there's some really good suggestions, I may skip the jokey ones to get to the good ones, and I apologize. There's no system here beyond however I decide to handle this is how we're going to handle this. And I hope you enjoy the wonderful music from our music friends in the background. This is Nat9 with a couple of tracks, the more subtle tracks as exceptions. This is all Nat19 music. This is all stuff that we own. I've been very happy about it. Alrighty. Okie dokie. Let's first check on my save. 78%. That's fair. Let's open up, let's say, the PDF for Lyra's Guide. Switch the view to 2-page. And just so you know, by being in this stream, you are also going to be getting a little bit of a sneak peek at stuff that's in there, because I will be throwing the PDF up on the screen in full color today. So, let's change the music to something a bit more. There we go. Let us begin. I am going to make sure this looks good. It does, and I'm going to be... Boom. Welcome. Welcome to this. Okie dokie. Let's get into the first questions. Okay. From the Orzhov Prince. Setting guide rules. What was your thought process on Cursed Dragon Spears and where it currently stands balance-wise? It's an incredibly cool spell, but I personally believe it does a tremendous amount for a 3rd level spell slot. Well, without reading the rest of your questions, it is 2 different levels of dangerous to cast. Like Spiritual Weapon, Sword of the Archmage, it's almost on the level of most legendary magic items for a 3rd level spell that doesn't require concentration. As I mentioned, what was the thought process behind what legacy spells I modified? I'll get to that in a second. Sorry, the chat caught me. My brain did what my brain does. I'm actually gonna switch the screens. No, this is fine. Can I? Where? Let's go down. Let's go. Scroll the fuck down, you. New spells. Okay. So we are looking for... Sorry, I'm trying to figure out where I want everything on my screen. Move you over here. Dragon Spears. Yes, so I will point that out once I get to it, but just to give an idea of what everybody is talking about. Come on, you. A lot of spells in here I did not want to include, by the way. There's a lot of them that are just Cursed Dragon Spears. Okay, so just so everybody knows, 3rd level conjuration spell. It's from the Chromatic Convocation. You summon a series of glowing spears made of ash and obsidian. They float around you for the duration, which is 1 bonus action. The range itself. It lasts for 10 minutes. You're right, it does not require concentration. Well conjured, you can use them on your turns as a bonus action to make a melee spell attack against a creature within 5 feet of you, or a ranged spell attack against a creature within 30. If they hit, they take piercing damage equal to 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. That's down. You can't quite see it on there, can you? Maybe I'll switch to 1-page view. Yeah, that might be better. On a target takes piercing damage 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability. When you hit with one of these spears, you can invoke one of the following effects. And these are the effects. You can lower their AC, do burst stuff. Oh, I just realized I gotta make sure that's bolded. Whoops. So the question was, what was my thoughts on it? It seems pretty powerful. Well, the answer to that is that it is a Chromatic Convocation spell. Being cast at 3rd level, which means when you cast it, so chromatic damage, we don't gotta look at that. When you cast it, you do have to make a DC 13 spellcasting ability check, which is not terrible, but if you're casting the spell a lot, you will occasionally fail it and occasionally not. On a failure, maximum hit points are reduced by twice its level, so in this case 6, unless you cast it as higher. The reduction cannot be undone short of anything but such as a wish spell or divine intervention or an equivalent. Until you complete a long rest. It has the possibility of borking you when you cast it. It is meant to be powerful. I think that that opens up a somewhat broad question. Which is, why are some spells just inherently more powerful? Because some spells in the book are just inherently more powerful. A lot of the spells that are under these groups, and I think I even mentioned this somewhere in here, a lot of the spells that are under the groups, such as the Blood of Cinerus, the Chromatic Convocation, what have you, they're usually a little bit more powerful because they are meant to be something that you talk to your GM about. And you should have to have some kind of conversation about how they were learned. And even from my point of view, and I vaguely include this in our stuff, even though it hasn't come up a whole lot yet, the idea should be that some spells are better, but there should be certain difficulties associated with learning them and finding them, because they're not something that everybody just knows. Was the typo on page 265 ever caught? Well, the page numbers are not. One second. 265. What are you talking about? So yeah, there should be a conversation that goes on. Are we talking about here? 265? What typo are you talking about? Just saying the typo is not helping me very much. What typo are you talking about? Where is it? Again, next to Manifest Hanyo. Telepathy? That's not a typo. Manifest Hanyo. Unless I'm missing something that you're talking about. You're talking about telepathy? That's not a typo. That is a portmanteau. That is telepathic empathy. That's a word that didn't exist prior to being written down here. If you could, you know what? I'm gonna save. Boobadoo. All right, but anyways, yeah. So some spells that kind of feeds back into the question of a lot of spells are more powerful, and they are pretty powerful because the GM should have to be able to arbitrate somewhat if they should be included. For example, one would be within their rights to maybe, and this, I'm not even running it this way yet, but in the future I might, might be within their rights to be like, for example, scroll all the way back down to spells. One might be like, well, perhaps in my game, if Tequin is a god that I am including, or if there's an equivalent that I want to use that represents them, perhaps the Epic of Duality spells are only available to those who follow Tequin or have studied under Tequin, or you need to train with somebody who knows them. So these spells might be locked off from you. Your GM may decide, unless you have some reasonable source to get them, even if they are on your spell list. I think that things like that make a world a bit more fleshed out, and it's sort of the reason why I'm doing the spell groups. That, and because I like making class features that specifically reference them and draw from them, because having lists like that makes my brain buzz. But I hope that that effectively answers that question. Now, Cursed Dragon Spears is meant to be something that is more powerful because A, it can cause you damage to your hit points, your maximum hit points, which sucks and lasts until next long rest, and that's not the worst thing in the world, but if you're upcasting it especially, it's going to cause issues, and you will occasionally fail it. And beyond that, it should be wildly difficult to get because of how niche it particularly is. So, like, if any of my players were like, I actually had a couple of them. A couple players were making their characters and they wanted to take spells that were both, one was eidomancy and one was the chromatic convocation. And I did stop the character creation process, and I did have to be like, okay, then we have to have a talk about how you would get them. And we landed on that they can't. In some cases, I would not care if it was fun and flavorful. In other cases, I think it's fun to have those considerations because they open things up to feeling special. Okay. Do you plan to release the Talons of Azarul and General Abishai? They already... But by General Abishai... Is this done yet? Hold on. I'm going to check if my thing I'm saving is done. It is. We want... Where are you? My brain is not braining. Hold on. Hold on. Boom. So when you say General Abishai, I'm like Stainer. Oh, you mean the Abishai, the Grand Abishai. Okay. When you said General, I thought that you meant like rank and file. Yes, I think in a future thing where we release a book that expands more on the hells and whatnot, I'd like to. But because they haven't appeared yet, because most of them haven't appeared yet, and because they would basically all need their own section because they're not just a template you can slap on something, I made the decision not to include them in this book because A, I felt like I wouldn't be able to give them all of the information that they needed. I thought that it would just end up feeling like you had half of the tools you need to really use them. And also just because I would have to nail down a lot of things that I think I'd like to spend a little bit more time working on. Because if everything I want to include with them was included, it would probably add about another 50 pages to both books collectively. And with the size these things were getting to, I was like, I'd rather save some of that as a surprise if I ever do more with the Talons. And also it just was a lot of work at the time. Especially because I made that decision before we decided to do risk and reward, so I was especially trying to be careful about our page numbers. Why did I put the black-footed cats into the book, and why are they so deadly? It's true, they're little monsters. A couple things in here are here because I wanted them. Talons of Azrael, don't need them. Black-footed cat, ooh, surprise hunter. The black-footed cat has advantage on the first attack it makes in combat, and the first time each turn it hits a creature that is surprised, it gets a crit. If this cat surprises you, it's critting you. It's gotcha. Fucking look at all these things it can do. It's a tiny beast. It's based on a real cat. It's based on the real cat that people like to cite the statistic that it is the most efficient hunter in the world. Of all of the feline animals, it has the highest kill rate of any hunter, almost entirely because of what it goes after. But there it is, black-footed cat, and Avi owns one. The little menace. Like that. And I mean, it goes without saying, but that and... Scroll past all this, scroll past all this, scroll past all this, scroll past all this, scroll past all this. I think I scrolled too far. All of that and... including the capybara, and also including the capybara as the best familiar ever. So this is an admission on my part. Yeah, it's the same cat Alfie found. Admission on my part. Everything here under Gregarious Familiar, I had intended to make more familiars with unique effects like this, that if you had them and you had a bond with them, then you would be able to use them to gain special abilities, like just have like a little secondary feat based on it. But with everything else that ended up going into the book, that idea ended up falling to the wayside. I'd like to revisit it in the future, but the capybara ended up being the only one that I made, and I decided to leave it in because I wanted to. And yes, that was an armored giant capybara. That is a Hado Scrambler. It is a majestic mount meant to be ridden by a medium creature because it is large. Also, giant capybara. Let's see. Next up. How do you make a monster? Is there any monster tricks or tips for a new DM? If you're new, I would mostly stick to putting new coats of paint onto things that exist already, because there's a certain muscle that you need to sort of build and work out over time to get why monsters work the way they do. So I think it's worth noting that when I make stuff like in this book, I usually make things that are geared around how I like playing and how I play, because I must imagine there are others who want to do it the same way. So I make the kind of stuff I would want to see. Regarding stats, there is a guide in the monster manual or is it the DMG? It's in the DMG, that talks about how to make stuff. And it talks about the statistics you could follow. But the thing about it, and somebody might skewer me for saying this in the D&D community, those numbers are almost always pointless because things in motion often are more than just statistics. You have to kind of... The way that I often do things is I make creatures based on the idea of what do I want them to do. When they show up, what role do I want them to fulfill? And I create effects that kind of fulfill the role they're trying to do, that make them into the support or the tank or what have you. And then after that, I mostly pull up creatures. I usually pull up 5 or 6 other creatures from other books that are within 3 points of CR, and then I start figuring out which of them I want it to feel the most like, and then I start deciding how much I want their hit points and their hit to be similar to those things. So, and the thing is, I've worked on a game before. It's unreleased, so I can't talk about the full project, but I worked and I was the lead designer on a TTRPG system, so like I know how to make things from scratch, which is a different process. But for D&D, for the most part, it's kind of just all about pulling things up and comparing and contrasting stuff constantly. And eventually, after years and years of doing it, you get a good feeling for it. And I think a thing that I like to remember is that when I make monsters, I'm trying to make things that will be exciting to fight. Not necessarily that are good at, murdering, although that's a big part of it. I don't necessarily care about things that make grounded sense. I care about making things that will be fun to encounter and fight, both to imagine and to roll against. And, sometimes things are powerful, and the way that they fight ends up being... sometimes the dice make things discouraging when they otherwise couldn't be. Not spectacle. Fun to fight is not spectacle, because things can have spectacle and also be unfair. You can have something that spectacle is not mutually exclusive, but spectacle can be separate from. You can have something exciting to describe and watch that feels bad to fight. That's not fun. Throwing an ancient dragon at a level 2 party is spectacle, but it's not fun because you can't interact with it. Things that are fun to fight are things that do cool momentary things, usually only 1 or 2 things because there's so little time in fights. But they do their cool thing, and then there's sort of, I gotta erase that. Then they give time for people to adapt to them. Most things that are fun to fight, you can sort of figure out what they're supposed to do, what they're trying to do, and the fun of fighting against it is, if you have a good table, in my opinion, is the table starts recognizing, okay, we need to stop it from doing that thing or do that thing back better. That's fun to fight when people engage. I think that's about the best I can give. But in the early days, start with making monsters by finding things and putting a coat of paint on them, changing a couple features around, like taking a giant. And if you want a big old scary alien thing, take a giant. Take like a hill giant or something and just slap a coat of paint on it, change some of its damage to psychic. And it'll feel different. And I think if you make incremental changes and slowly get more ambitious, you will learn how to make things better. But the best thing to do is just compare and contrast. It's make a thing, then look at other things around the same CR, both a couple points up and a couple points down from official sources, and then figure out if it sits where you want it to sit. I've read through a little of the setting guide, and looking at the blurbs that Lyra's written, you can hear them in her voice, and that's amazing. That being said, why does the Capihado not have a permanent sanctuary spell placed on them? Is it because they're too powerful? That's funny. Do you ever think you'll expand on the Yokai and Hanyo subraces to include more, I assume, types, creatures in the future, and how most Yokai, specifically Dai Yokai, are formed? I'm pretty sure we do touch on stuff like that. Hold on. I mean, we did include more types. Currently, there was already a lot of legacied in content in the setting guide, so I didn't want to add too much and have it just be bloated with existing content. But, they come to be when a yokai has persisted so long, consumed enough that it evolves beyond its peers, or when it, we go well into how Dai Yokai, Yokai Lords are created. I mean, like everything, like many things in D&D, a lot of it's left out of the world of mechanics and more in the world of theatrics, because the exact mechanics of how, like, a Duke of Hell comes into being is not as important as the GM's decision to have something become a Duke of Hell. But there's lots of, I can't remember which of this information was present in the old book and which of it is new, but if you check the Dai Yokai section, I'll go over it a little bit. So they basically just, in the same way that yokai are an accumulation of negative feelings and events and such, a yokai lord is just a particularly powerful distillment of those moments and those feelings. They can accumulate power over time and evolve into a yokai lord, or they can just be created from a singular massive event that causes them to be... I'm sorry, I'm adjusting a cord here. My headphone cable's always so difficult to manage. Causes them to be. It's probably, in my opinion, the more powerful yokai lords in the world, in the setting, would be the ones who come to be from particularly huge events. Like, for example, if there was to be let's say a famine. There was a famine that hit a particular country, and a particular kind of yokai would be born from feelings of hunger or the desperation that comes with starving. I think that one being born from a nation's hunger would be more powerful than a yokai lord born from a smaller event that grew up, because I think that they're more pure in a sense. They come into being with a greater concentration of the emotions that created them. So that's something that's not in the text that you could take from it. It's if you want to imagine yokai stuff and how it persists, like imagining how like things go in media like Inuyasha is probably a good way to imagine how they're meant to be. Din, hello! Oh, thank you for the raid! Exponential curve of power from the initial event. I think it just has to do with the fact that they're born with a specific purpose. In general, I'm kind of into the idea of things that are created from a concept are stronger at the get-go. The more powerful the foundation, the more powerful the individual. So, like, you can create something that is, like, something can train itself and grow into being more powerful, but something that is born from a huge event, it has some more to go. It's like Frieza. It's like Frieza and others of Frieza's race from Dragon Ball. Frieza did not train. He was as strong as he was by just coasting through life. A yokai lord that is born from a particularly huge event is kind of like post-training Frieza. They have the potential to grow upon a much stronger foundation, as opposed to having struggled as a lesser yokai to get to that same point, because they have to keep struggling to go further. And I think that's a proper answer for that. In the future, though, oh yeah, just to quickly put a button on it. In the future, I would love to do more stuff with the Hanyo race and whatnot. I think from here where we go is more specific specialized books about specific areas of thought, like fiends, certain countries, DGRs, space, etc. And I think that we can get into like much more specific content. That's up to your GM, Cena. What's the smallest event tragedy yokai can be born from? Saitei yokai are meant to be the lowest form of them. Scroll down to that. These guys, based on the same sort of yokai that in Inuyasha were always the ones that were flying around getting sucked up by Moroku's wind tunnel, they're born from anything. Like, they're not anything. They're born from basically nothing. Like, they can be born from above things that stick with you. Basically, a tragedy that creates a yokai, it has to be something, at the very least, that is going to stick with you, that years later you might reflect on, that changes you even a little bit. If it's something that immediately you get over and you're fine with, then it's not enough to create one. It has to be something that leaves an impression on you. Will we ever get the DGRs not featured in the guide like 004? Yes. And that's that question. What changes to Sword Saints have been made since the last Kickstarter playtest release? Well, technically, this is the last Kickstarter playtest release. But to give a more helpful answer, why don't we take a look at it? That's actually a good question. I'm not going to go too in depth, but that's boop. So the Sword Saint. So one major thing that changed is that Soul of Lushu, I think it was the Soul of Lushu. No, the feature that previously allowed them to regain half of their focus points on a short rest, that's just now baked into it. They just have them from the get-go. This is from years of moving it back and forth, and making it harder and easier for people to regain points, and just the observation, both at my table game and in Gilligan's Grave, that once Sword Saints at early levels ran out of focus points, they do not feel like they have anything to do. They just stop. They don't feel like the joke is they become just a good fighter. The thing is, with 5.19 content out and the fighter being expanded on, they don't become a good fighter. They become a bad fighter. So especially with that in mind, and the idea that this is a game, and you want people to be doing things, and observing that, Sword Saints, unless No offense to many people, unless a GM creates a situation where either they forget rules that limit them or they give them too many resources. Sword Saints don't unbalance, especially the early game. So we wanted them to have more, so we increased the amount of points they got to be 5 plus your level as a Sword Saint, so you have at least 6 out the gate at level 1, and you always get half rounded up when you complete a short rest. So that at least twice a day, if you're using our rest rules, which all this is designed with the intention of, if you do that, then you'll always, every time you take a short rest, get at least another 3 in, which should be at least enough, if it's all you're using it for, to get a Dragon Surge in every short rest, which makes Pia happy and makes you feel good. The other changes, some other things changed in here. Overwhelming Advance, the cost of it was reduced to 1, because I became aware that in most cases, especially early on, first of all, it drained them too fast to be fun. So I made it 1 because I think that that's totally fair, especially because it's just 1 reroll. When it was 2, it's like, well, if you just taken a rest, why wouldn't you just Dragon Surge to get more attacks instead of re-rolling? So we don't do that. What else? Falter Fleeting has gone through a couple of changes. In our last Princess game, I actually ran our variant wrong. I calculated it wrong. It is now, as a bonus action, you can spend 1 point to move an additional number of feet equal to 10 times your proficiency bonus. So 20 at first level, by the time you're at 20th level, it'll be 60. As long as your movement speed isn't 0, which must be taken by the end of the turn and may be used as part of any movement type you have access to. It should also be noted, it does not increase your movement speed. It allows you to move extra feet, but it does not increase your movement speed. This means you cannot use it, get 30 feet, and then dash to double that 30 feet. If you do this and then dash, this movement is not part of what dash considers. It's outside that calculations. It's outside that calculation. So that's one of the major changes. Falcon Wing Deflection, pretty much the same as it was. Cunning Vertical, same as it was. Adept Moment changed in that instead of rolling a d4, you just re-add your proficiency bonus unless you have a feature like Expertise. So it has become basically, I now have Expertise if I want it, for one instance. Also changed up the fighting style advancement stuff. I'm sorry, I just got a bit of stuff on my glasses. Give me one moment. Fighting style advancement. They now get a bunch of them. So you can choose from the ones that are here. They now advance their fighting style at 7th, 10th, and 15th level, just to give more classes more to do with fighting styles. So those also push forward more, which I think is good. I think it looks fun. And I think that's basically all the changes. None of the subclasses really changed all that much. I don't remember any that we made. Here's the new points. You know, it occurs to me that almost no one, including us sometimes, plays with the maximum points per turn rule, but that's neither here nor there. Next question. What was the thought process behind the legacy spells you modified? Right, this was similar to my earlier answer about how not wanting to include a whole bunch of spells. So the modified spells page is here. These ones are just in with their original names. These ones all had their names changed. These ones were included because I wanted to reference them, but couldn't because they aren't in the OGL, so we had to change them, and while I was in there anyway, I decided to make small alterations to them just to get them in line with the 5.19 mentality of having more options, as well as make some of them a little bit more specific to the setting. I didn't include any that I didn't have to. I only included the ones that are text referenced or classes referenced, and when I started making the guide, some of the stuff that was made didn't have making a guide or the OGL in mind. Kitsu the King, I think off memory, Muramasa got a slight buff. No? Not since the last Kickstarter update. I don't think so. Might have since the last Kickstarter update? I don't think it did. I don't remember ever. Time is soup. I don't remember exactly when I did everything I did. But the mentality behind which we're added, it was entirely just based on what was needed. And I would have liked to have had half as many spells in here. Part of where my brain was, by the way, this is one of my favorite assets. This item right here is one of my favorite images in the book. Don't ask me why, it just is. I figured that since I was re-adding so many things, okay, I'm sorry, Kitsu, I don't remember when stuff was added and when it wasn't. If it did, then it did. Heckin', brain. Train of thought. There's that ADHD going. Since I had to re-add a bunch of stuff anyways, I figured I might as well put a little twist on it so that it feels like something that's worth having in the guide again, so it doesn't just feel like page bloat. Hilariously, when this began, I was really worried about taking up pages unnecessarily. About how to put this. I was really worried about looking like we were just trying to fill pages. I wanted everything to be substantial. By the end of the project, I realized it got so out of hand that there's no way anyone could ever interpret anything we did as trying to fill pages, given how much was in there. So I was like, well, that wasn't worth worrying about. But, yeah, we tried to change up everything that was included just so it was good. A couple things were a bit more, like, for example, Bestial Echo and Conjure Draconic Echo. I wish I didn't have to include both of those because they both took up a full page, but we did. We had to. Oh, OGL. And there's a couple spells I got to clarify things on. Like, I included Crystal Gate, which is beyond the Blue Veil, because it allowed me to make the point of stating that you cannot, as by Raw, use it to get outside of or into Somnus Domina. It can only go to Somnus Domina parallel worlds that branched off the same inciting incident that made this universe. But yeah, that's most of that. Oh, what spells did I not want to include? I already answered that. If you could explain eidomancy spells to someone new to the setting guide in a For Dummies-esque manner, how would you do that? I'm going to check a message I just got. Oh, cool. Eidomancy is a higher, more volatile form of magic reserved for higher beings. How would I explain it? It is magic that has a higher, more versatile output, using a similar magical energy, but it is more dangerous, and because it is not bound to kind of the laws of equivalent exchange. It isn't bound to, like, one magic goes in, one magic's worth of magic comes out as a spell. It's more like one magic goes in, and then the imagination of the caster takes over from there. Because it's, then I would explain it that way. It is just a higher form of magic that is more dangerous. An analogy that I kind of like using is, magic is produced using electricity, and eidomancy is produced using nuclear fission. One is inherently more dangerous than the other, but has its benefits. Potential future books, how would you handle potential retcons to previous info? The same way that any D&D book does. By just including the new information. And probably pointing it out in a errata somewhere, but the question as old as time. You just... The new information trumps old. Same with this book and, like, previous things that came out. I'm not really gonna, like, release a public statement being like, the old Sword Saint is not there. It's that there's new options to be used, and if new beats old. Let's see. A lot from Arcane on the front end. Is the Skulker's Grimoire spell group not specifically in the specified in the setting guide because it's already in the Kitsadria book? Feels weird with it otherwise showing up out of nowhere. Because not everyone will have Lushu's guide. Oh, yeah. Oversight. I don't think it's really gonna break anything, though. I mean, there's... It's listed in stuff in here and whatnot. You know, if we didn't have these images right here, it probably could have gone right on this page. Well, that is a bit of an oversight, and that's all it is. Oh, no, you didn't. No, you didn't do anything, Arcane. I just noted that you had a lot on the front end. If I skip any of yours and come back to them later, that's why. What was the inspiration behind the Sacred Obsidian subclass? You already know the answer to that. I saw your comments. It's... Yeah, you know what? No, I won't be my usual coy self about it. I won't be like, oh, who knows? Oh, did I not make a bookmark for the Barbarian? No, that's the spell list. I did. I totally did. Boom. So... Sacred Obsidian. You paint... I'm gonna change the music up. Hold on. I'll change it to Cave Jam. So, Sacred Obsidian. By painting your skin with tattoos and arcane symbols, you can cause them to cause temporary transformations on your body using pseudo-arcane methods, turning your skin to a carbonized substance that is as hard as steel. When you make an attack action while you're raging, you can use your bonus action to make 2 unarmed strikes. While raging, your unarmed strikes deal 1d8 plus strength. When you're hit, you can use your reaction to harden your skin there to increase your armor class against that attack. Once per short or long rest, when you rage, you gain temporary hit points equal to twice your barbarian level. Feral avoidance. This charm protects your body. The charms protect you become autonomous and so fast that they give you... let's see, what is it? When you make a saving throw to take... It's avoidance. You do a save. It's evasion, but for all saves. Nanomachines, son! It's based on Senator Armstrong! Some of the stuff in the book is in there because I thought it was fun and I wanted to include it and I wanted to get an idea out of my head. It is absolutely 100% based on fucking Senator Armstrong. Vaguely. Enough that it, like, when I do references these days, I try to detach them enough that they can stand on their own, but I also try to have the reference be worn enough that people that know it can, like, see it and maybe enjoy it. But no, it's Nanomachines, son! 100%. My source is that I made it the fuck up! Which I did. I made this the fuck up. I did this. I gotta admit, the Barbarian is one of the classes I find making subclasses the hardest for, given how straightforward they are. Because you never really want to distract too hard from their core tenets, which is rage, attack. That's why, if I could go back, Champion of Mortuus and Gladiator, they're not the same. But the theme of the two are so similar. If I had had more time, I would have done more for the Barbarian, and I think that's one of my biggest regrets for this book. One of my players wants to play as a dragonfly-themed Hanyo. What sort of event do you think would have created a dragonfly yokai lord, and what? So that question's hard to answer because when I create yokai, I associate very specific things with them. I associate events with them. I don't... How can I put this? I would have to research dragonflies and find out what kind of symbology is behind them, and then go from there. My brain goes to obsession that a dragonfly, because it's just lateral thought. There's really no justification behind it, but my brain goes to that a dragonfly yokai should be born out of obsession, because there's something that is just... I imagine a dragonfly, and I imagine them lording above things, floating above things. They're vaguely related to dragons. They're given a fairly regal name for being the tiny little stupid insect that they are, and they're often associated with in mythology with things like the Tonbokiri. I think I would probably have it based on some kind of obsessive behavior, but I don't want to get too deep into it, because I think that's a good starting point. I would go from there. As to what features they should have, if I get into building content, then I'm not going to get through all the questions we have, because quite a few are coming in. So the AMA is not going to be me creating content today. So I'm afraid I'm not going to answer the second half of that question. What is the smallest of... Oh, we already did that one. It's well known that you use historical or pop culture figures as inspiration for Sword Saint subclasses. I was wondering what the inspiration for the Eroded Lord was. None. And that's something I'm moving away from. There's a couple that are in there, like the Heavenbreaker, but you should go on to assume from now on that they're not based on anything. The Eroded Lord is based on a particular character in the history of Somnus Domina. They are setting specific. They are not based on something. Originally, I based Sword Saint subclasses off of pop culture stuff because it was a fun way for me to make content. But while I was making this setting guide, and even a bit before that, I found that I just sort of graduated from that mentality somewhat. I'm gonna move my mic around so I can relax a little. Get out of here, fruit fly. Go away. What was the original Heavenbreaker's name? Who knows? If you were going to rework Monk in any future content, do you have any ideas on how you'd like to approach that? I was starting to think about it, and then the 2024 Monk came out, and the 2024 Monk is kind of radical. So I'm gonna probably read over that and then go from there. I don't have any solid ideas for how I would do that off the top of my head. Is the existence of someone with the last name Pendragon wielding a sword named Caliburn now a Nat 19 multiverse constant? No, it is something that exists in our history, and it is something that exists in Somnus Domina. It is not a constant in any way. There's just the two instances. There's nothing deeper to it than that. You probably already answered this, but how does one learn eidomancy? By either having an innate sense for it, like exarchs do, or discovering it and working it out, or being taught it by somebody else. You can be taught eidomancy at least on the preliminary levels, the same way that any magic can be taught to you, but it's much more dangerous to learn and to use because of the restrictions that come with it and the dangers that come with it. And if you're not a creature that's naturally attuned to eidomanic radiation, then it can kill you. Especially, and remember, non-statted creatures. We're to assume that 99% of everything in the world, the creatures that we don't interact with for the most part, basically all have about 10 hit points. Eidomancy and chromatic convocation spells, they run a risk of just killing you. If you're like a novice wizard who doesn't know much about it and you try to cast eidomancy and you don't do well, you're dead. You died. You're gone. So, it's just risky to learn. The main barrier to entry is that not a lot of people know about it, and it's a world that suppresses magic, so that layer of magic, if it's even to be called magic, because it's sort of a different system. Any thoughts on an eidomancy-based class? There are eidomancy-based classes. Oh, you mean like a full class? I don't think eidomancy is at this juncture a mechanically. I'll answer that later. You probably submitted that. I'm not going to answer that now. But yeah, from people, from scrolls, from items. It's the danger of trying to learn it that's the problem. Are there any art pieces that are secretly Somnus Domina Briar? Nope. I've already sent this question to the feedback link for the Kickstarter. Is the dex increase from the Way of Tomoe bow folding sky by design, as the bow is a great bow and use strength instead of dex? That might be. Hold on. Hold on. I gotta find a thing. Where are you? You after that? Yes. Boop-a-doo boop boop a doo boop doo 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 doo. We're gonna do. That's true. I thought I changed that. So the easy answer to that question, and I thought I had changed the text. I'm gonna write this down, actually. Great bow. Is that a change was made that you can use strength or dex. for them. So that effectively answers that. You, Folding Sky should use either Dex or Strength, preferably Dex. Hockey? It's a question that just says hockey, as in the power system from One Piece. I suspect this may have been posted when I was talking about what the Obsidian was based on. Not hockey. What was the inspiration behind the eidolons? Well, I've had this setting bouncing around in my head since I was 16, so it's been based off a lot of things. The easiest answer is that the eidolons were, vestigially, kind of tentatively based off of the Final Fantasy Tactics transformations that people would go through when they used the Zodiac Stones. That's vaguely what they were originally based off of, and they were going to be a lot more aloof and a lot more force of nature-y originally. But they evolved over time, and different things influenced them, and I don't think I could say they were influenced by any one particular thing. They definitely are an amalgamation of shifting ideas over a decade of, brain rotting about my own stuff. But they're based on the Zodiac, loosely. Some of them have pretty specific inspirations, but I think even the most specific of them sort of got lost in the production of them. I'll tell you this. A lot of how the gods work in Somnus Domina, especially lesser gods. If you guys have seen an anime called, what was it? Was it Rage of Bahamut? What is it, Genesis? Rage of Bahamut, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember the exact name. There is a scene where after winning a little old war against a bunch of demons, some angels descend to a king to present Joan of Arc, don't ask, with a special sword. With a sword to, congratulate them for the service that they had done and to empower them. And that scene was a huge defining moment in how, when I was working on the setting a long time ago, I wanted gods to have that kind of a relationship with mortals. I wanted them to be just another, realm away. For the idea of a god choosing to come down and be like, you did a great service to the divine order I represent. I would like to give you this. I always wanted them to be kind of hand in hand with mankind, but busy with their own things, preoccupied with their own portfolios, and not wasting their time fixing everything that mankind did, because gods live on such a long scale that would basically just feel like babysitting. I wanted, so the eidolons are kind of based on that kind of interaction. And that's a really roundabout way to answer the question. They're all inspired by various different things. And yet, the inspirations are so varied that I've kind of forgotten most of them. They've just gotten lost in the sauce, especially as I've been building the setting guide. Because it's no secret that as I've been building the setting guide and had to separate this from WotC content, a lot of things that were a bit nebulous, even in my mind, took form. There's that old joke that Matt Mercer made when end of season 1 of Critical Role, where he was producing his first book, the smaller one, the Taldore one, and he was telling someone where in a map a town was, and he was like, yeah, no, it's up to the and he pulled out his own book and he looked at it, and he just as mine. It was like, I wrote it down in a book, so now I have to get it right. I can't just make it up. That's kind of where I am with Somnus Domina in this book. A lot of things took shape, and a lot of things had to become solid in my mind. I had to decide how a lot of things were foundationally working, but it was good. It was a 2-year-long exercise, and I actually, if Gilligan's Grave is any indication, I think that it was very healthy for our games, for Nat 19 that happened, because I have such a clear idea about how everything works now, and it being out of my head is so good for it. I know that it's going to kind of ruin a lot of fan theories when people end up reading a lot of some of the lore stuff. And they're going to be like, oh, well, I was hoping that that could be something else, especially because there's a detailed... Yep. There is a... Go up to the top, you. There is a relatively long... Hold on. I'm getting to it. I'm gonna zoom in slightly just because. There is a relatively long section on the history since the Age of Sundrance of the setting, right up to the current age. By the way, because I know some people will like this. Cinerous Clade! Anyways, heckin', there's probably some people that are gonna have some of the mystery sapped out of it, but if you don't want that to happen, don't read the timeline. is my advice. All right. How much fun did you have naming the different DGR units? I'm gonna take this moment to flip over to them. So there's all their names on the side. A lot of fun. They're all named after historic pieces, with a couple of exceptions. They're all named after historic pieces of equipment and such. I love all the art we've gotten done for them so much. I wanted DGR-01 to be Excalibur because I wanted it to be like the most notable. Like everybody knows Excalibur. It's the most famous weapon in history. So I wanted that to be number one. And with this idea that the names were sort of just plucked out of the ether. They're not really named after anything. They are just amalgamations of things that the frame built and the one with Chaos gave them. Perhaps some of them are named after people, some of them are named after things, some of them are named after portmanteaus in universe. That they are the names of things we recognize is a cosmic coincidence. Yes, Lotus, the Kickstarter preview is supposed to be in black and white. It is a preview, and it is... Certain safeguards have been taken to make sure it's not distributed in a way that would be bad for the final product. But, I absolutely loved getting to make all of them. Honestly, fun fact, almost all the NPCs that we still need to get made for the guide, almost all of them are DGRs. Because as you can see, there's a big space here that we need to fill. There's a big space here we need to fill. Big space here we need to fill. There's a bunch of them. Space there, space there. We have basically one artist currently working on doing the remaining DGRs. It's the one that did this one, which, by the way, this is currently my favorite DGR design. This and Skolfnung are both my favorite ones. That's this one right here. They're the one that's handling basically the remaining DGR designs. So much fun. All right. Cena Bones. Friends wants to make a drag queen pedal knight, so the question is by proxy from him. What is the most slay pedal knight subclass? What a good question! Oh, let's actually get into that. Which one is the most drag queen-esque? Which one is the most slay queen subclass? Oh my god. All right. I think I immediately know which one. But let's see. So we want kind of the ones that are a bit more get 'em. So Black Rose, it's up there. Not Coral Rose. Dahlia is a good choice just because it's very fiery. Very, it would be very eye-catching. Well, with setting itself on fire. Not Gardenia. Morning Glory? No. Osmanthus? I feel like Osmanthus would make a good aesthetic for that kind of look, but not Pink Rose. Red Spider Lily's good. Get us our Inuyasha ending 1 flowers up here. The first ending of Inuyasha is just embedded in my memory. Let's see. I think, and this is where I land, Sakura, I think. Just because it is a pseudo-vampiric subclass that is based around stealing health and it also uses a lot of sorcery. I think Sakura but that may also be because it's my favorite of the Pedal Knight subclasses. No one's ever used it, or at least I haven't had anybody use it around me, but it's my favorite one. I love it to bits. It's so good. So I'm going to say that one. Wine Cup's pretty good, too. Any thoughts on an Eidomancy-based subclass? Right, I said I was going to come back to this. So, Eidomancy-based subclass. I don't think that Eidomancy as a concept, as a mechanical bed, I don't think it's broad enough yet to do that, although that might be a reason. Perhaps if I were to make an Eidomancy-based subclass, that would be a good reason to do that, to give it a stronger foundation. Because if I'm going to make a subclass on top of something, I want the source material to be much more expansive than the class. Is there anything in the setting guide about it's a brain later? I see them in the chat. My brain fires. Get to it later. It would take a lot of work. I don't have any thoughts about it in mind, but in future I do want to do more XR. So, how do I put this? Eidomancy is somewhat limited regarding what I'm willing to release publicly by what I want to put in Nat 19, because there's certain things in Somnus Domina that I want our show to be the first place that they are seen, and then put them out, because I want the surprise. And there's a lot of Eidomancy and Exarch related things that are tied to that. So I think that most of my thoughts are tied up in that I would want to make something like that for our show and then expand them out for public use. So, no major thoughts. I think but if I did make one, it would probably be another one of those slightly above average, like your DM needs to understand that you're going to be performing a bit better, all of the Favored Soul. Although the Favored Soul didn't actually end up being as broken as I was expecting it to be. Even though I gave a whole warning about it in the setting guide, when you actually run the numbers on it, it's not actually that crazy. What are the 3 top subclasses you made or updated for the guide as my favorites personally? Warlock got a lot. So a lot of the cool things are in Warlock. By the way, everyone who has the PDF stuff, I'm going to change since we're into the Warlock. Change the music up a little. So the Warlock, anyone who's got the guide, I recommend checking out the Pact of the Tome options, because I'm very proud of this. I think these are a strong addition to the Warlock, and I'd like to see how people deal with them. But the False God subclass is one that I really liked for the Warlock. I did a lot of Cleric subclasses, like a lot of them. And the Sorcery domain was one of my favorite things I did for the book, because I think it was a very well done merging of 2 classes, and that it doesn't invalidate sorcerers, but it really, I think the end result really gives you the impression of being a divine caster who's dipping into sorcery and metamagic. So I think that one turned out really well. That's up there on my list. You know what I'll do? I'll go through, I'll pick my favorite for each. The Champion of Mortuus is my favorite barbarian subclass. Heck, and mostly just because it's tied to Mortuus, which is something I want that god to have a bit of a presence in future games, if I can help it. For the Bard, what up, Lyra? For the Bard, I really liked the Gambler. I think that if you're really into that kind of mechanics that come with it, with a little bit of things being out of your hands, I think the Gambler is a really solid, really fun class. But it is one that I think if a GM was going to have somebody play one at their table, they should be like, you should expect some frustration every now and then, in the same way that you should expect it to go really well for you. I already talked about Cleric. Druid, another class I find it hard to make stuff for. Primeval Glade, hands down, the Dinosaur Druid. The turn into or summon a dinosaur druid is one of my favorite things that I've ever made. I'd also like to in the future make more dinosaurs for monster manuals. I'd like to make like dire dinosaurs. I'd like to make some other ones because dinosaurs are great. They're wonderful. It's always fun to be like, oh, we're wandering through the forest. I don't have much planned today. A T-Rex. There's a T-Rex. I think we've officially exited laid back Logan territory, by the way. But am I gonna make answer it later? Don't see it and answer it now. Fighter subclasses. First of all, my favorite fighter subclass I made is the Fighter, the 5.19 Fighter, which, by the way, big fighting style advancement. The Fighter gets so many fighting style advancements now, which I think the moment I added that in, I was like, that is, in my opinion, a really strong change. Just to give the Fighter that strong sense of I hyper specialize in a few things. But probably, I mean, I've always loved the Brawler. Probably still the Brawler. One of the first subclasses I ever made, and still one of my favorites. Monk. Convergent Soul, probably. Either Beloved Tribute or Convergent Soul. Beloved Tribute because, well, first of all, I love their art. Second of all, I just really like the clergy and following based subclasses because they're so entrenched in like what they both inform and are beholden to behavior you should expect from certain clergies and groups, and I think that's really good if you like are the kind of table that cares about it. And the Convergent Soul, which I'm gonna be real, is basically just a translation of the monk that I made for the Magus minor magecraft classes. I wanted to convert it over to work with the arcane stuff. I just like that it's a monk that has a little bit of randomness to it, that has the split fist stuff, you get tables. I think that it's fun to have classes that have abilities that, not every attack, but when it triggers it, you get to roll a die and do some stuff. I think it's fun to roll off tables for things. The Wild Soul Barbarian is a great example, and I wanted to capture that kind of fun with this. Paladin, I already answered it. Rogue. I really like the Potential Chainer for similar reasons to the ones from before. Though I really like the way the Vigilante was changed. What the fuck? What is this? Huh. That's odd. I don't even know where that text came from. DC for all concentration checks you provoke. I mean, that's for the Vigilante. Why did that pop up there? That's weird. We're currently engrossed in doing another read through, another editorial pass on the book, so like that kind of stuff is what we're trying to catch. Probably Vigilante or the Potential Chainer. Sorcerer! Phantom Soul, probably. Possessing people is really fun. I do like where the Idola Cosmologus is going. The changes I made to it I liked, although I do think that subclass in general needs to be refined. But you did miss the Paladin one. It was the Sorcery Paladin. Warlock, I already said. Wizard! The Vestian Advocate is my favorite of those added in this. Absolutely, hands down. What up, Sorrel? Alright, that's that question. What was the first Eidolon Eidolos you made? Impossible to answer that question. I do not remember. They've been bouncing around in my head for a decade, or more than a decade. They've been bouncing around in my head for like 15 years. Which ones came first and which ones are even remotely resemble the original ones? It's a lost concept at this point. You're planning on releasing some DMS stuff, right? This is not about DMS. We'll maybe do a DMS thing in the future. My answer to whether or not we'll be releasing DMS stuff is maybe. We never have given a finite answer on that, and we've said that we might. That's it. Is there anything in the setting guide about the junction Sword of Damocles, or is there going to remain a mystery as to why that happened? I mean, the answer is that it junctioned. The answer is that circumstances were in place where it was able to connect to its pilots in a way that they influenced each other. Eidomantic energy caused an evolution in it very briefly, as is what junctioning is. And there's, I mean, I'm being a bit coy about it, but it is what it is. As someone who plans on making eidomancy spells out of some old epic mage spells I adapted for 5e, do you have any suggestions to make more eidomancy spells? Not really. Nothing that doesn't apply to make normal spells beyond that they should be more powerful than... So, eidomancy is kind of my answer to the 10th level spell, 11th level spell thing. Because I find that people get really stuck in... this idea. They get kind of obsessed with like, oh, there was 10th level spells. Oh, what a cool idea. It's not actually that cool of an idea. It's just creating another number and then having spells that are bigger. Those kind of things already exist. We just don't really call them spells. We call them rituals. We call them whatever. They still exist. I think that people get a bit hung up on like ludo narrative and mechanics. And eidomancy is kind of my answer to the, you want bigger, more dangerous magic? Here it is. Without the weird insistence that Mistra died, came back, and limited 10th level spells and whatnot, because I don't really subscribe to this idea that the god of magic can seal things that way. I mean, they can; it's their purview, but that seems way more force of nature-y than gods are depicted in the Forgotten Realms usually. And it just seems like an odd thing. It's a very editorial decision that is then reinforced with lore in a way that doesn't escape being a highly editorial decision. I got away from the question, though. For making more eidomancy spells, just know that they should always have effects that are, like, 2 or 3 levels higher than what they do. And they should be hard to obtain. Beyond that, just the regular advice for making spells. Make sure you have specific ideas. Don't make anything that's already being done, even if it's just like a coat of paint on top of it. Like, don't make a poison fireball. There's no need for you to create an entirely new poison fireball. Just when someone takes fireball, if they want poison fireball, be like, this fireball does poison. You don't need to, if you're going to commit energy to making things, then spend time on things that aren't coats of paint. Let's see. Design-wise, which creature art is my favorite? Oh, what a good question. Oh, we're gonna scroll through real quick, aren't we? Items. Hey, Acria. That's the High Lord of Sermonway, by the way. Alright, heckin'. More items. Oh, I already know what it is, but I'm gonna go through them anyways. So, Skolfnung, Messite Goliath. Gotta get to the actual stuff. Got our Abishai here. I really like the Abishai designs. I really wanted to detach the Abishai from just kind of looking like the dragons that they correspond to. A bit of a heckin' encouragement on my part. If you like, for example, the black Abishai, the bloated Horker, but you're like, I really would have liked it if it was the green one, just change their color. Just shift them up. They're kind of a little bit made for that. You'll have to change a few damage types and whatnot, but that's sort of what they're for. Alright. Let's see. He's cool. Like him, like them. I really like the Ignatos art. What up? This is, we just put this in because I had to see if it would fit. It's gonna obviously be complete more by the time we're done. Let's see. That's one of my favorite pieces. One of the first ones we got done for the guide, the Amniotic Dragon. I really like that one. Archons. Chem did an amazing job on these. Oh yeah, the Lion Archon. One of my favorite ones as well. Love him to bits. He's a big old guy. Like the Belzer. Like these guys. I mean, the best art is objectively this Capybara. That's just like a fact. They're pretty cool. Cinderbite Spider. We're working with a lot of new artists as of this guide, but this one, the texture on their art is like so fantastic. There actually someone has me introduced me to. I've always really liked their design. They've not had a chance to show up, even though their children were murdered by the highest standard. Amir, what up, Amir? We're gonna get to it. We're gonna get there, and I'm gonna show you what my favorite art is. I know exactly which one it is. Linger on this for a sec so people can enjoy that. And moving on. DeQuinn, Vestius, DMS stuff, Devas. What up, buddy? You're looking spicy today. Yeah, you are. We got our DGRs, which we've already taken a pretty good look at. Lunar Gatekeeper is one of my favorite pieces of art that we've ever gotten. It might be my favorite piece of art we've ever gotten out of Hasme. Love that one to bits. My favorite. We're getting close. There he is! Ace Anima! Ace Anima is absolutely my favorite design that's in the guide. I have plans for them. I want to do stuff involving Ace Anima. They are a train of thought that I hope to take Somnus Domina related content down in the future. They're tied into the stuff that I want to do with the setting. Ace Anima! Oh. I knew that it was them earlier when I went back and I was like, wait a minute. I saw this piece of art, which is also Ace Anima, and I was like, oh fuck, it's that one. Yeah, absolutely. Ace Anima. I really like the art for the Eidolos as well. Same person who's doing the DGR art for a lot of these. Aurelie Quipcat! Finally given the page space you deserve. This one, by the way, for those that are unfamiliar, this is the Eidolos that became Keen's Eidolic armaments. Marcus complete. As someone who's soon to release 2 books, is this how you're going to continue? As someone who's soon to release 2 books, is this how you're going to continue to release new stuff? I might be a little bit unclear about what you're asking. Do you mean, am I going to continue trying to release stuff in this Kickstarter, like make larger books format? I do want to make smaller stuff. I want to make like more 30 to 40 page like splash books, like make a class, make some stuff to go with it. But I think in the future we're going to be aiming at bigger books, because this is sort of the start of where we really want to be. Like, you should start here with Somnus Domina content. The previous stuff, for all intents and purposes, is almost always going to be, you know, quote unquote non-canon. I know that on our Discord, people bring up that Eidolon document from a million years ago. That is basically entirely outdated at this point. Especially because that was made during the days where I wanted stuff to be kind of Forgotten Realms compliant, and I have completely moved on from that mentality. So, this Eidolos is also a giant, by the way. Keen would be like that tall. We'll probably be releasing stuff in this format going into the future, but I do want to make smaller stuff that I just throw up on drive-through and or on our site. Keeping in mind, as I make smaller things too, they will probably all eventually be then re-included in bigger books as compilations for people that just want the bigger ones. But yeah, late to the conversation, what is an Exarch? It's not, I noticed that spelling it literally X-A-R-C. It is not, it is E-X-A-R-C-H. And an Exarchs, you can find information on those at the beginning of the spells and magic section. There's a whole ton of information on them. Hirohito was one of them, kinda. I will leave it up to people to read that stuff on their own time in full if they want, but they are basically individuals who were born with a natural disposition towards channeling eidomantic energy. They can do it safely. They do not need external equipment. They are the ones who, if they were ever to reach godhood, are capable of becoming eidolic deities as opposed to lesser gods. They are just sort of, how to put this? They're the soul reapers to the normal people of the rest of the world. They're the people that are just born with an immense amount of potential and energy. They're effectively immortal. They're so dangerous that the eidolons didn't wipe them out, but the eidolons, who were once exarchs themselves, had to at one point be like, if we allow them to exist in polite society, they will cause problems because they're like the halfway point between a mortal and an idolic god. So they were all put away in their own little world. I've made jokes before about how there's a part of Somnus Domina that is basically the city of anime people compared to the rest of the world. It's exarchs. If I was going to make a shonen anime based on this, and it wasn't a mecha anime, it would be based on exarchs. The joke would be the plot thread would be the main character is it turns out to be like a half-blooded exarch or something. Like they are basically the people who are most in tune with the energy that suffuses this world. And they have a special thing called a spiral signature that, for all intents and purposes, it's your big anime transformation. It's your big cool thing. It's your unique ability. It's your noble phantasm. It's your Bankai. It's your domain expansion. It's your cursed technique. It's your Kekkei Genkai. They have an ability that is unique to them, that is rooted in the core of who they are, that they can discover as they grow. Are you planning on making more Chaos subclasses? Probably. If I can think of cool ideas for how they'll work. Which lesser god was my favorite to create? Which lesser god was my favorite to create? Where's the divine section? Which one was my favorite? There's all their emblems. What a good question. I'm trying to remind myself of all of them. Lusuria and Invadiva definitely had the most thought go into them, given like what they are and the inherent conflict that exists inside of them, and in that they are both Fey gods and part. You'll notice, and I must point out that I was doing this before Elden Ring ever came out, so, you know, fucking keep the accusations of copying to a minimum. There's a lot of instances of deific entities that are split in two in Somnus Domina, like Tequin, Lusuria, and Invadiva. That is intentional. That is a thing that is intentional in this world for reasons. I really like Mortuous. Collectively, the three gods that represent the cult of gentle sins, those being Scorn and Gotham, and where are you? Scorn, Gotham, and Hydracool. They were fun to make. They were you know, this world's effectively equivalent to like the Dead 3 and whatnot. I also really liked making the Paras prismatic gods, effectively the four elemental gods. They were a fun concept to work up and make, just to have them exist in the world. A lot of them existed in the back of my head as kind of incomplete concepts for a long time, and the setting guide gave me a lot of reason to like nail them down and figure them out and actually expand on them. And I learned so much making this guide and like figuring out how I would nail this stuff down and what information was good. Like my ability to write stuff, I feel like it majorly leveled up while I was making this book. Like my ability to put information down on paper has changed fundamentally, and I'm very happy about it. It seems to me that some of the Sword Saint subclasses have been removed since its solo release. Are those subclasses adaptable to the current version of the class? You'd have to do it on a case-by-case basis. I can't promise that they are. And I mean, it's not that they were removed, it's just that they're not included in this. Because they might be re-included later. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier. There was just too much bloat. If I tried to adapt and re-include everything, then it would have been too much. Plus, with the Sword Saint, I just don't want to include a lot of the more overtly referencey ones again. I do not want... I feel like if I do that too much, it erodes the identity of the setting guide somewhat. And there's already a lot of clear influence from my interests in this, so I have to figure out where to hold back. I have to show some restraint. Otherwise, it's just all the anime and video games Logan likes the setting, which I find it is currently escaping from, and I'd like to keep it on that path. Is there a piece of lore that was never really able to be covered in Vestige or Gilligan's Grave, but you are looking forward to people finding out on the guide? Kinda? I mean, there's 90% of what's in here has nothing to do with the campaigns. Because the campaigns aren't the totality of the world. Like, the campaigns are pick niche things to happen. Like, the highest standard is so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. They're only significant in as far as we care about following their story. Maybe that'll change one day. Maybe it won't. Is there anything that I want people to find in the books that we didn't go over in those? Gosh, I feel like there definitely is, and I'm trying to put my finger on it. Oh yes, astral elves. Everything to do with astral elves. Anyways, next question. Do you think we'll ever get art of the Junction Sword of Damocles? Maybe, but not for the guide, not for this. Hands are full. So what was Hirohito's big technique? Oh, he didn't have his spiral signature. He perhaps, much like the eidolons don't have a spiral signature because they ascended to godhood before ever developing it, and then it sort of cuts it off at that point. Hirohito was a half-blooded exarch, and he never achieved like the level of proficiency or purity needed. He jumped straight from being far too far behind to beginning his ascension to be an idolic deity, the hunger of Honokuni. Although the fact that he was a once every thousand, like a talent that only would come around once every 1,000 years, that was tied to him being an exarch. His unnatural abilities were largely tied to it. Easter eggs. I mean, there's a lot. I wouldn't know where to start. This is the last question, by the way. Easter eggs. Easter eggs. Easter eggs. Easter eggs. Is there anything in here that is an Easter egg? Oh, them. Kinda. This is kind of jumping back a couple questions. Piece of lore that I'm excited for people to find. Oh, they wouldn't find it out from the guide. Okay, so all I'll say is that for future things, this picture is a huge, down the road, people are gonna slap their lap and be like, oh my god. Eventually. Because at this, they're gonna be like, I know that. I'm trying to think of any more Easter eggs. I mean, technically, Suzume being in here is one. Change the music. One sec. What up, QB? It's so funny. On the one hand, I'm like, I don't want too much of my interest to show up in the guide. And then on the other hand, man, I wonder where this came from. Fun fact. I've thought about writing a novel about the events surrounding this character. But is there lore about Neramis? Yeah, in the timeline. Yeah, Suzume being in here is technically an Easter egg. Tomoe being in here is technically an Easter egg. Technically. Sometimes you use art because it gets the point across. Oh, actually, just answered a question from myself. Earlier, I was asked, is there anything in here that, like, that we didn't get to go over in Vestige, and kind of with the I'm gonna add a qualifier to that question, that mattered to Vestige. This. The White Shadow. They were mentioned a bunch of times, technically, in Vestige. They've been mentioned a whole bunch. And I think that by reading this, people will understand, if they can connect the dots, people will understand why the White Shadow is so important. But it's incredibly important to a bunch of stuff in Vestige. Can an Eidolos willingly choose to become an armament without being defeated? Yeah, Orbis Maharaga did. Orbis Maharaga was down but not out. They can save us into Retia. Also did that for Keen. Keen didn't defeat it, but he persuaded it. How much of the book are the players of your game allowed to read? They can read whatever they want. I don't tell them not to do anything. I release it to the public. It's out there. Mr. the Logan, you have covered it very briefly in Vestige, but is there that sweet, juicy, delicate laid lore about Neromus, the big centennial stinky fish? I think I said this earlier, didn't I? I think I offhandedly answered this question when I saw it. Yeah, in the timeline. There's a whole... Alright, Divine Curtain, Warm One Moment, Danger of Exarchs, Foretelling of Dissolution, Whispers, Simonian Empire, Provincial War. Elmira has been discovered Platinum City, Stream of Cahulus. Right around here! Right around this area. The Stream with Cahulus section. The whole Industrial War and Centennial Tyrant section. That talks about Neromus and his stuff. Oh, sorry! Neromus. Heckin... Wait. Oh, sorry. I've answered the question because you've conflated two things. Neromus and the Centennial Tyrant are two different people. High King Ultrin Kurgan, Retia was the Centennial Tyrant. They are the one that caused the Industrial War to become the issue that it is. They are not the Emperor who died and caused the splitting of the Simonian Empire. That was Neromus. However, both of them are included in and talked about in the guide. Lyra going on a little thing about it. Out of all the Eidolos, which one is my favorite? Ace Anima! Are the in-lore locations of... Ace Anima, absolutely. I'm gonna just go back and look at Ace Anima again, because I love them. Hold on. Ace Anima! Are the in-lore locations of the Constellaquaries and the Primal Gemstones included? No. If you decide to use the items, then I will leave it to you to determine where they should be and what they're doing. We will use them. I will use them in our game as we need to. And they will be in a place that will be irrelevant to where you decide to put them. Was there a Dewey equivalent for the Lunar Gatekeeper? No. The Lunar Gatekeeper does not have a conscience. It is not... It is just a construct. It has the self-awareness of a regular DGR, but it is stunted. It is, for all intents and purposes, just an extension of Vestius. There is nothing else in there. It is not an individual. Which plot hook in the book, if possible, would you like to run a full campaign on? Let me just go to the fucking hitherto unreleased conflicts in Retia section, which lists a bunch of quick hooks that you could use as a log line for a game. I'm already doing that one. I'm already doing that one. I'm already doing those ones. Probably, if I could choose one that I'm not already going to be doing, probably the Industrial War, and focusing on that, because it's something that's mostly been in the background of the game so far. It's just kind of been set dressing. That is a thing that's talked about and affects the world, but we don't show it. I probably want to do something more directly with that, but just to show what Cahulas is doing and what Retia are doing to, like, antagonize each other. But it's kind of a hard question to answer. I mean, more stuff with the Talons of Azurul, because I feel like people would latch onto that. Actually going over what all of them are doing and what their overarching story is. We may someday get to the bottom of what happens with the 5 of them, and we may not. Who is Kavek? One of the eidolons. How many rocks are in this book? Rocks? How many rocks are in this book? If this is a joke, then I just got buzzbrain going on. I don't know. How many rocks? Lots of rocks, probably. I mean, there's a lot of items that are rocks. I'm gonna move to the next question. For one of my players, is there anything you can drop lore end here about the Gloom Lush and the Othrek Yar that's not in the race's little blurb? Off the top of my head, I mean, introducing all the stuff in the book is already, I mean, there's a whole section on it in the guide when it comes out. So, I suppose just wait for that. Or pause this and read this. Any faction that would try their hand at world domination if they got their hands on a small army of DGR units? Kind of. That's sort of an emerging thing in the setting, like as of the sword of Damocles' appearance in the sky and the world finding out about these things. That's becoming more of a thing. World domination in Somnus Domina is a difficult concept. You know, in a world full of magic, dominating the world is difficult. You kind of end up just roaming yourself and spreading yourself too thin, and then too many factions that all have magical and technological capabilities would fight back. So there's very few factions that are looking to dominate the world, nor would many of them have any desire to do so. The family definitely wouldn't. I guess the Retian Empire, in a sense, they're kind of conquer hungry. What with having annexed 6 countries into their empire. I don't know. No good answer to that question. I'm running a Final Fantasy campaign, and I'm planning on adapting the DGRs to function similar to the weapons in FS7. Any suggestions? Well, if they're a weapon, then they're not mechs, so you can't pilot them. Because weapon is a creature. Not much, really. Hold on. Let's look at one of their stat blocks. Navaratna's not a good example. He's too unique. Yarn Riper. I mean, if you'd want to make sure that if you're using them, you have some equivalent to idolic like damage and whatnot, because it matters. Beyond that, no, not really. I mean, you give them a more organic but like stony exterior, and they would work well for that. I can't really give any real advice. Similar to the Slay question, is there a subclass you reckon by itself just needs a big old hug in the sense of it's a bit depressing feeling? It's gonna be a Pedal Knight. That's gonna be... Where are you? Why can't I find things? By the way, I'm going to lock questions here in a second because we've been going for almost 2 hours. I mean, once I figure out the answer to this question, I'm locking questions. Pedal Knight. Delia. Not Fox and Club. Foxglove, probably, because it's defined as someone who is distant. Hydrangea, probably, since they're inherently someone that has trouble revealing who they are to others. Hydrangea. Hydrangea. And with that, I have locked questions. After we finish these questions, I think I'll be done. Can any DGR be junctioned with, or are only specific ones compatible? Any of them. That's one of the defining features of a DGR versus other types of mech-like things that may eventually be released. They're all built using eidolic reactors, and they're all susceptible to processing eidolic energy in a way that is conducive to them embodying something that is able to possess them effectively. What would you say was your favorite saint relic to create? Well, let's go take a look at them, and then I'll give you an answer to that question. I liked Folding Sky a lot. That's true. Tempted to say Washing Pole just because I want Agicide to have it. Part of me wants to say Tenshi Saiga because it was the first one I made back before the idea of a saint relic even was a thing in my head. It was just a weapon that jived well with the blue metal stuff, and then I just in the background changed it into being a saint relic. Lord Spiral was fun. Itonia's Trust was really fun because the ones that are not weapons are great. That's why also I changed them to Saint Relics as opposed to Saint Myth Weapons, because there's just too many that aren't weapons. Probably Folding Sky, Itonia's Trust, and the Washing Pole all sort of tie for my favorites. I should say. Last question. How many artists did I work with for the book? That's a fitting last question. Well, why don't I... Now, I don't have a specific answer to this. And the reason is that some of the credits that I have, I didn't actually know who the artists were. There was like a couple of groups I worked with who I was talking to, like a correspondent who passed stuff on to their company. But in one case, like I know I was working with like 9 or 10 different artists on specific pieces. And when I asked like what they wanted to be credited as, they wanted to be credited as the company as opposed to as the individuals. So like, this is technically my list of artists and graphic designers. But HPL Game Design, and HPL Game Design, Cat Crossing, and Hydra Studios, they were all a multitude of people at once. So the number's probably into the 20 to 30, probably like somewhere between like 22 and 25. I work with a company. Yeah, I work with a bunch of companies on a bunch of things. I know that we feel indie, but one of the reasons why I can make a lot of the stuff that I make the way I do it is because whenever I was working my job as a lead game designer on a thing, I made a lot of connections that one might not normally have. We've also been reached out to by a lot of people. There was, I can't say who they are for privacy reasons, but there was a pretty major graphic design and art company who, after we made Lushu's Guide, they found it, they reached out to us, and they're responsible for some pretty major things in a different art-related industry that we're really excited to have worked with. I guess I can... They've done a lot of stuff with Riot, like a lot of League of Legends stuff, and things in that vein, and we were very happy to get to work with them. Power being incorporated. Oh, this stuff happened a long time before we incorporated. Nat 19 incorporating is actually a fairly recent event. I mean, that happened in the last few months. Oh, the artist who did this is one of my favorite, Jack Nugent. I don't know if Jack's his actual name, but he's got it on his contact info. The stuff that we've worked with them has been some of my favorite. Yeah, the company I was talking about, actually, they're the ones that made this. This was the first piece that they made. For all intents and purposes, Nat 19 should have a larger team working on this stuff. In almost all cases, similar books would be made by a much, much, much larger team. But I have found myself doing all the things. It's basically me, my editor, and artists. And I am in charge of all of the layout and the writing and the formatting and the design. And I don't want to do this again. I don't want to do a project of this scale again. It tired me out. I'm stressed. I'm so grateful. It's been so good. I've gotten to do so many things. And, like, I've experienced so much because of this project. But I simply do not have the energy in me required to do this again. I need to do smaller scale things in the future unless we can put a team together. And to do that, I think Nat 19 is going to have to move into being a bit more on, like, a larger stage, as it were, like Kobold Press and what have you. And we're not ready to make that jump immediately, but I'm hoping in the next few years that we can get ourselves up into that same space. I can. A big part for me, dog, is figuring out where to let go. Because a big part of it is I do it all because I know it all. I would need to find people who gave me great confidence that they could handle what needed to be handled. I think it's one of the curses of coming from such a self-motivated background is that I find it very hard to let go of things. But I'm learning. I'm learning to delegate. Hayden's so good for that. Aaron's so good for that. They help me so much. Oh, the art in this thing is... We've had so much art done. That's been most of the journey, is getting art done. Gosh. It's so crazy to look over this document and to see how much has gone into it and how much there is left to go into it. Next time we do one of these things, I almost want to have... Next time we make a book for, like, Kickstarter, which I'm going to aim for like a 200 to 300 book or page book. I want to be at a point where I've done enough work beforehand that the book is almost done. Like it's ready to go basically at the design phase beforehand. Because we had to figure out so much after going into it. And like finances were a big thing for me, figuring out where money needed to go. It's no secret that on the first end of this, we spent a lot of money from the Kickstarter trying to figure out how to make everything happen. And then on the back end, we became incredibly cost effective. And I'd really like to just be super cost effective out the gate next time so that we can take as much profit as we can and push it towards the next thing. Because we're going to come out of this with profit. Absolutely. But we could have come out of it with a lot more. It's one of my... Love that image. Hydra did that. Hydra Studios did that one. Chem did so much of this. Oh. But yeah, I hope the next time we can apply everything we learned. It's fiction, Red. Everyone in fiction is either cool, or they're hot, or they're mean. Or they're somewhere on the Venn diagram between those three things. You get to the center of the Venn diagram, and that's where scandal is. Oh, it's so crazy to think of when Nat 19 started and what it's become. But I digress. If anybody on the Discord over the next week wants to suggest themes for what we might do with future Monday streams, I would be up for doing things like, for example, sitting down and just going over like the Ranger or the Favorite Soul, like going through it ability by ability and talking about what you can do with it, how you can build it, what the ideas were. I'd love to make content in that vein. But until then, these questions have been great, and I can feel myself getting a little tiny bit tired, and I think that it's probably good to go out on a good note. So, I'm going to be taking off. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for this, and keep an eye on the material, keep an eye on the Kickstarter, keep an eye on the Twitter, and with good luck, hopefully within the next couple months, this will be ready to go up on drive-thru, and then we can begin the printing process. Oh, that's a good idea, Burning Hound. Using like the legacy trait system would be a good one. But anyways, I digress. All of you, have a great night. Goodbye!